And we are live.
Great, thank you. Welcome to the Dublin City Council Finance Committee meeting of May 5th, 5:30. Yet another online meeting, so appreciate everybody's flexibility. Anne, can you call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Saludo?
Here.
Mr. Keeler?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Super. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to take a look at the meetings from our last meeting, from the November 13th meeting, actually. And I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Anne?
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
And Ms. Saludo?
Yes. Thank you. Now I'm going to hand it over to Spring, who has a presentation for us regarding the Dublin Hospitality Restart. Scott.
Hello all.
Hi, Scott.
How's it? Good to see everyone.
Likewise.
Yep. I'm going to kind of tee it up for Dr. Lee, our board president, who's just going to say a few words, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Dublin Convention and Visitors Bureau Board for allowing us to present this proposal to jumpstart the Dublin economy. Really want to thank City Council and especially Dana and Matt for leading us, our city, through these unprecedented times. Second, I know we're here to discuss the restart plan, but just wanted to give mention on how proud the board is of the DCVB on how they were supporting this city, pivoting during this crisis to support the community and really staying home and staying safe. And staying home is really counter to our mission statement of getting people out and about in Dublin. Last, just to mention, our deliverable has always been on ROI. The DCVB has prided itself on making sure every dollar given to the organization generates a return. And now there's no more important time than now and to make sure this happens. And and you'll see that the restart plan does just that. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Scott Dring, our executive director, and thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Let's see if I can get this going. How's that? All right, great. Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity and the time. I hate to start a presentation on a downer. Let's see here, wait. But here you go. So I know Matt shared this last week. It's reality. It's, our bed tax, it's going to be, we project about 64% down in 2020 versus the previous year. So it is what it is, and we'll address and we'll go from there. I did want to give you a quick update on what we've been up to. When we saw this coming immediately in early March, our board made some took some immediate action. We reduced our fixed monthly expenses by 35%. We had employee layoffs, we reduced all employee salaries and benefits, paused all sales and marketing efforts, and cut all the expenses that we possibly could. You worked on our utilities being postponed, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure why I put that last bullet point in, other than that I thought it was kind of lame that they didn't work with us, but hey, we all can't be great stewards. Here's our potential resources. We do, through our board insight and learning from 9/11 and 2008, that having reserves in our work in terms of marketing is critical. So we have $200,000 in reserves. Being a 501c6 gives us, puts us behind the 8 ball a little bit versus 501c3s and others. We're not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. We can't receive grants. So we're a little limited in the CARES Act on what we're able to get. We have applied for the EIDL loan. We did that last month. We haven't heard anything. We can't count on that. We hope and get something out of it. We did open a line of credit with our bank for $100,000 that we can draw upon if needed. I can tell you, I guess the message for this slide is that we're good from an operational standpoint till the end of the year. What we're requesting from all of you support-wise is purely sales and marketing. It does not include operating costs whatsoever. So we'll talk about that in a minute. When this first happened, we quickly instituted a three-phase strategy for the organization. The first phase was obviously to stabilize the organization and serve as a resource in any way we possibly could to our industry, the residents, and so forth. Phase two is where we're in right now, and I think Dr. Lee kind of mentioned that briefly. For 32 years, we've promoted and sold Dublin, encouraging people to come to our town. We had to do a total 180 and pivot and tell people to stay home, and it's what we did. I think a lot of organizations in our world went dark, went quiet for a while to figure out what to do. We thought it was our role as a community leader to really serve as a resource for the community. So we've done numerous things. Let me give you a couple examples. Right now, for example, we're doing something called Dublin Dreaming, which we're creating live video on Facebook and Instagram that really highlights Dublin's most peaceful locations, kind of giving residents and visitors a moment of calm, I guess you could say. We've been to Indian Run Falls, Glacier Ridge, Ambley Park. This week we're at Dublin Springs Park in the Watch House. So it's been tremendously popular. And then this is something that actually we're going to continue throughout the restart plan. We've also created a website called Dublin at Home, and it's a one-stop shop or one-stop site for Dublin residents. It includes all the takeout dining opportunities, which as of this week, we're updating on an hourly basis. Has a lot of home inspiration ideas, activities at home, virtual classes for fitness, outdoor activities, even a virtual visitor center. So it's a lot of stuff along those lines. And my favorite that our family enjoyed was the Dublin Daily Challenge, which was 10 days of 10 no contact activities to support Dublin businesses locally here. Things like sharing your favorite Dublin memory, getting dessert, takeout, visiting a park, etc. as well. And there's many more we've done. The third phase, which we're here tonight to talk about, was the restart plan. And I'm going to kind of talk kind of high level, give you a couple bullet points on this plan. This is not a CVB plan. It is truly a community plan. We have spoke individually with all our hotels, many of our restaurants, our retail, our small businesses, HDVA. We even had a conversation yesterday with the North Market, who's not even going to be opening until late summer. Everyone has had feedback into this plan, incorporated their initiatives in this plan. So it's really one plan as a whole. It's not a CVB plan. So your support is going to support all these businesses, not just the CVB as well. Like I mentioned, 100% of this, every penny spent will go to marketing and sales, no operating costs. You've been hearing me say this for almost 20 years, many of you longer than some other ones, but what we do is economic development. We are generating jobs, we're generating awareness, global awareness of the city of Dublin. And as Dr. Leahy mentioned, there's tremendous ROI. This entire plan is based on ROI. And I know there was some discussion last week at your council meeting about the timetable, and I'll go into that in a little more detail in a second. But there definitely is a finite start and ending point to this plan. And we believe it will end at the end of this calendar year. Here's the goal of the plan. It's to implement a unified sales and marketing effort to restart the hospitality industry and the local economy by recovering lost jobs and revenue for the city. It's really amazing if you look at the numbers. 70% of our hospitality industry jobs in Dublin are gone, which is staggering. That's restaurant, hotels, retail, etc. One of our key metrics is to get a majority of those jobs back as part of this effort. I only have 2 slides left here, and what I would like to do, rather than diving detailed into the weeds of the plan, I know Dana and Matt shared the plan with you. You've seen it. I shared it with you last week. I'm just going to kind of go through these stages and maybe highlight a few of the initiatives, first going through 75 initiatives of the plan, and I'm happy to ask any questions you like and dive into as much detail as you like down the road, but I think that might be the most efficient use of your time to do that. The stages that we've broken up for this plan is in 3 different stages. and don't get caught up in the timing so much yet. You know, there's going to be triggers that kind of institute and start this plan going. You know, we could start this plan as quick as next Monday night after the council meeting, if you so desire. I think stage 1 and 2 are pretty much interchangeable. You know, after hearing the governor today, it sounds like he's going to make an announcement on the restaurants on Thursday. We're hopeful that they'll open at the end of May, sometime in the next few weeks, but we'll see. But the focus is really toward Dublin and Central Ohio residents in those first 2 stages. We're not going to be ready yet to invite visitors to stay at our hotels at that point, we don't believe. A couple initiatives to highlight to give you examples of what we're thinking in those 2 stages. You know, the number 1 initiative in our plan, and it's by no reason, it's not there by accident, is to establish and promote a clean and safe environment for visitors to come to the city of Dublin. If we don't provide a safe and clean environment, everything we else do is going to be pointless. We have to make sure people are comfortable coming to our community and doing the things that we're proposing they do. So that's number 1 at hand. Some of these initiatives that we're looking at is we're proposing a cleanliness initiative. You know, we're working with hotels and restaurants, getting their cleanliness and cleaning activities so we can all get it together. It's interesting. We had a meeting today, and we heard from hotels actually in Las Vegas have created a thermal camera. So when people walk into your property, they actually will somehow have this thermal camera that will determine what their temperature is. And if they reach over 100 degrees, then they'll go into another room and figure out, kind of redo, you know, their thing there. So that's the kind of high level that our hotels, our Marriotts and our Hiltons and such are doing to make sure their guests and our visitors are safe. You know, we'll be working closely as well as some of the things that we're proposing, and we'll have to work hand in hand with Dana and his staff. And we've had these conversations already, is creating sanitation stations throughout the city that we can provide to our residents and visitors. You know, encouraging no-touch crosswalk, doing that in some form or fashion. Our job is, in our role, is get all this product and create it in some kind of marketing piece or marketing message that we can then convey to everyone to ensure them that our community is safe to go to. Another key element in that first couple stages is outdoor dining. We know when the restaurants are open, from what all direction says is they're only going to be able to open at 50% capacity. There's no way these restaurants can survive at 50% capacity, especially after going dark for 6 weeks. So we have to provide some kind of assistance with them. And takeout is going to be their biggest way of doing it. Our thought is, can we create outdoor dining opportunities? Think of like a outdoor dining garden per se that could be in the historic district or Bridge Park, that is very safe, very modern, very secure, very clean, that we can then encourage people to take out at a restaurant with their family and friends and go and enjoy it outside as well. And I'm not just talking downtown Dublin as well. I mean, I'm talking all of Dublin. It's something we could do at the Bogan area, potentially over at different places off Muirfield. It just depends perimeter and such. We could look at logistics on that as well. Another area, and I think you guys touched on it last week, is the Dora District in downtown Dublin, the designated outdoor refreshment area. That's something that we talked about last year. That would be a huge boost to our local economy if there's a way for us to make that happen. So I know HCBA and Bridge Park are working together right now logistically, and I know they're going to come back with Dana and Jennifer and the legal team and all of you to see if that's an option as well. Obviously, hotels aren't quite there yet in terms of bringing visitors, so that kind of business is going to be slow to come. But I think one of our opportunities and tactics for this first 2 stages is visit friends and relatives and really staycations, that kind of thought for the local residents. We know road trips for visiting friends and relatives and followed by road trips for leisure getaways are going to be the first bit of travel people do. So we're going to create visit friends and relatives packages, dining packages that will encourage local residents to invite their friends and relatives. We'll do staycations, encouraging residents. I'm not sure all about you, but you know, having 3 teenagers in our house for 6 weeks. I think my wife and I are going to be the first ones to enjoy the staycation in one of our hotels locally to get out of the house. So I think that's a huge opportunity for us as well. Stage 3, and we'll do other stuff like the Open for Business campaign. I know the city's working on, we had a meeting on that today. So we'll do a lot of other things on stage 1 too. Stage 3 is kind of the one that's the biggest challenge. It's the one that's going to have the biggest price tag. It's one that the majority of the expense will go to. We'll be creating specific campaigns, marketing campaigns to encourage people to come to Dublin. There'll be a summer campaign. There'll be a fall/winter campaign as well. The timing of these campaigns is going to be essential. When we do these campaigns, you can't be too early because if people aren't ready to travel, you're just wasting your money. You can't be too late because the marketplace is going to be saturated with all our competitors and our message is going to get lost. So there's got to be a sweet spot that we can really identify when to really release our message. And I think the important thing timing wise, we're going to have to work hand in hand with all of you, council, city, to make sure you're comfortable at a point when we're ready to go full court press and invite visitors to our community. We have to make sure we're comfortable with that step. So we're not going to be doing that behind closed doors. That's an initiative that we'll be doing with all of you as well. These campaigns, traditionally, the last couple of years, thanks to your efforts and support, we've always done regionally in Pittsburgh, Detroit, Indianapolis, those type of things. We just don't have the resources to do that. And quite honestly, people aren't traveling that far either. So we are really focused our efforts in state. It's going to be Akron, Cleveland, Toledo, Dayton, Cincinnati, and such to really hit those markets hard to make sure that they have the awareness of Dublin as well. Research will be a critical part of this. We're not stuck in a kind of, feel when exactly and have a guess on when this might happen. We are on a daily basis looking at all our research. We're tracking traveler sentiment right now to see if it's high, low, what indicators there are if people are actually starting to travel. Some of those indicators are our web analytics. Are people starting to access our website? Are people starting to request information from us? Are they starting to get on our social media? One crazy bit of research that we have is just through this phone. We can tell if people are starting to mobilize if they're traveling 50 miles or more away from their home. We'll be able to tell if people are starting to do that. Not specific people, we're not Big Brother, but we can tell in general terms if people are starting to mobilize and move. So those are some of the triggers that'll tell us that we may be ready to begin to market and sell city to get visitors to come here as well. And again, the budget for this is $300,000. It's, we believe it's a 7-month program. We'll end into this calendar year. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's purely sales and marketing efforts as well. Totally a collaborative plan. There's only 4 of us at the Bureau. There's no way we could possibly do this plan on our own. So we're going to have to rely on our industry and our partners. Not to be greedy, but we're going to need more help from the city as well. If you look at this cleanliness initiative, the DORA district, outdoor dining, those are all things that it has to have city and council support down the road. Using assets from the city as well, if it's video or graphic design communications. The Dublin Business Recovery Task Force, that's a task force that the Bureau, the city, and the Chamber created a couple weeks ago, bringing the top business minds together to help us get out of this, not only from a hospitality perspective, but a business perspective. We're going to rely and lean on those people and make sure we're all working together. Downtown Strategic Alliance, we started, 6 years ago? That's the group, the Bureau, Bridge Park, and HDBA in the city. We're working, meeting on a weekly basis to make sure we're all working together to help us get out of this as well. And the Chamber, a shout out to the Chamber. They've been an amazing resource to the local businesses and just keeping everyone updated. And it's something that we'll rely on them as well. To kind of wrap things up, I want to leave something positive with all this. And I think if you recall, 2 years ago, we started a DNA, it was called Place DNA. And it was an effort for us to kind of gear our message, is to determine our message and our markets and what really resonated to sell Dublin in the future. And we had numerous focus groups with Dublin residents in the Dublin business sector. And And out of that results, we had 3 or 4 key attributes that people said made Dublin so special. One was it was clean, the second was safe, and the third was outdoor amenities. So if you think about what people are looking for when they're traveling as residents, you know, those are, I would say, the top 3 things. So my point is we're positioned to get out of this. We have a product to get out of this. We just need to kind of make it happen. You know, and I wanted to end it on a real good note and kind of give you a quote. I went through all these kind of people, quotes that people were saying, and I'm like, I'm capable of doing this, so I'll do my own quote. This is you can attribute this quote to me, but I think it kind of gets the who we are in Dublin and the kind of people we are. So that's all we really have. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from council members at this? Would you like to move in staff report for councils, Greg?
You know what, Scott, here's my position on this whole thing that you've presented. I completely support everything that you want to do. And there's 3 main reasons for me, at least just from my perspective, why I can support what you want to do 100%. The first, Dr. Lee had mentioned that you guys are always exceptional at pointing out the return on investment and the value that we are getting for the money that's being invested in whatever program it is, whether it's normal circumstances or it's these circumstances. So I know you're very, very dedicated to maintaining that kind of information flow, and I know you would do that with this as well. The second is, quite frankly, your credibility. Your credibility, in my mind, is as high as it could possibly be. You know, what the job that you have done with your organization to market the city, like Dr. Lee said, that the ROI has been, it's been an extraordinary investment that we've made over the years. And I am absolutely certain that you will step into this situation and do that exact same exceptional job. So the fact that you are involved in this proposal and are going to be working with what is my third reason for supporting this, our staff. When you have the exceptional staff that we have from Dana all the way throughout the organization working hand in hand with you, I think this is not just a visitor's plan. This is a community plan, like you mentioned. It is sort of, you know, they say all charity begins at home, and that's what we're doing here. We're focusing on Dublin and then slowly but surely getting back out into the regular world. So for those 3 reasons, the ROI that I know there will be, the fact that you are the one that's involved and you're working with our city staff, and that the board and Dr. Lee and the quality of people that we have is truly extraordinary. So I fully support everything that you have proposed, and I know it is going to be a very reassuring thing when it is put out there and people can see we've got a plan to at least start to get back to normal. And I think you're right when you say we don't get caught up in the timing of all this, because, you know, we really don't know whether this is something that's going to be starting in 3 weeks or 3 months, who knows, but we will be getting there. And I'm very comfortable with the proposal given the people that are going to be implemented. So thanks for all of your work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Andy, you want to wait for staff's report? Super. Greg, I think that I would actually put a 4th reason on there, and you said it already, but there's a community plan. This is something that's going to take some partnerships across the city. And knowing Scott the way that I do, I have no doubt that, you know, the first thing he did was to think, all right, how are we going to partner? But I'd like to hear from staff. So Dana or Matt?
Sure, thank you. We have a report with a couple of funding options and a recommendation regarding the proposal. There we go. So there are 2 potential funding options for consideration should the committee decide to recommend to council to support the restart plan. The first is an appropriation from the general fund. Using this funding source would reflect the broad nature of the restart plan and preserve the fund balance in the hotel motel fund during this period of significantly declining revenues. Alternatively, the committee could choose to utilize the hotel motel funding for the restart plan The idea behind utilizing this funding being that the final phase of this plan is the longest and most expensive and most likely to generate hotel motel tax revenue. If you were interested in tying this expenditure most closely to the revenue source that it would generate, this would be an option. Staff would propose utilizing the general fund to support this restart plan. And one of the reasons for that would be that funding for this plan, this restart plan, is really an economic development plan. And there are $387,000 in unearned economic development incentive dollars available in that account. So we could reprioritize this funding that went unearned in 2020 and redirect it towards the plan. So as I said, staff supports the restart plan and utilizing the general fund. Staff would also recommend that the council committee direct staff to work with the DCVB to structure this in such a way that maximizes our reimbursement under the CARES Act. So whether that be a professional services agreement or some type of documentation that staff and the DCB will work out, but that we could really make sure that we get that reimbursement if that becomes available. And that's it for a staff report.
Sorry, I had trouble getting my microphone back on there. So discussion from council. What are your thoughts on staff's recommendation?
So I'm assuming we're looking for the entire 300 all in one fell swoop, as opposed to, say, you're doing this in phases, 25, 75, and 200. Is that what we're considering tonight, is the entire sum all at one time?
I believe that's the request. Is that correct, Matt?
That is my understanding, that the total plan cost is $300,000. Whether that would be distributed all at one time or over the phases as they're developed, I think we'd work that out.
So approving $300,000, but more or less acting as say a line of credit, if you will, where the city holds on to the money and doles it out as the phases are completed. Would that work?
That would cause us to have to do multiple appropriations, right, Matt?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do this is the 300,000 is approved. And then if we need to see, if some part of the agreement is important to you, as far as completion before we move on to the next phase, we could do that. But I think to make it fastest and easiest, we would try to minimize that and do a $300,000 appropriation, sign a professional services agreement with the DCVB to provide these services, and handle it as we do any normal contractual relationship that the city has with a professional service provider.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very comfortable with that. I will tell you, if there's one thing that Scott Dring does insanely well, it's to keep council updated on what they're working on and what the results of each and every campaign that they do really are, including ROI. And he has been just consistent and thorough in those efforts. So I feel very comfortable with whatever we decide doing that all at once.
Madam Chair, if I may, Scott, do you have any, if you don't mind, Scott, do you have any kind of preference if we set up agreement and pay that out in phases as part of the agreement? Does that affect you in any way?
No, I mean, everything we're doing, we can work with our vendors and pay it later on down the road. It's not like we need all the money quickly, and we can phase it in however it's comfortable for you guys. It doesn't matter. We're flexible.
Super. Any other comments, Greg? Andy? You guys are good?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Super. Was there any public input via email?
There was not.
Okay, super. Thank you. So unless there is a council member who wants to propose a change to the way that this recommendation was written, anyone want to give a motion to approve as written?
I'll make a motion to approve the request as written using the unused or unearned economic incentive funds as Matt had laid out.
Second?
Ann?
Ms. Aludo,
Yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
and Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Lee, and thank you, Scott, for coming in.
Thank you.
We know that you guys are going to do right by the community. You always do.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So our next agenda item is a presentation from the Dublin Arts Council. So I'm going to turn this over to David Guillaume. David?
Thank you. Let me just pull this. Let me just share the screen here. Oops, there we go. Okay. So first of all, I want to let you know that Robin Campbell, who is our board president, is on the call, and I appreciate her support, but I'm going to do the presentation. So thank you for inviting me to present the information about Dublin Arts Council this evening. I will be showing you summary financial information to supplement the April 21st memo to Dana McDaniel that was included in your packet, and will provide programming updates both current and in progress. First of all, Dublin Arts Council staff of 6 have transitioned to home offices and are healthy. The organization has remained nimble in its response to the pandemic and to the community needs. Our board of directors is demonstrating exemplary leadership and guidance, providing much needed in-kind and financial support. Art is essential now more than ever to remind us of our better selves and to help us support each other with creativity and compassion. During this time of social isolationism, people in our neighborhoods and across the world are utilizing the arts to bridge connection and healing. Art is not canceled. Dublin Arts Council remains dedicated to our mission, which is to engage the community, cultivate creativity, and foster lifelong learning through the arts. Shown here in this slide is Dublin Jerome High School student Cecilia Martina, and this is her chalk art in Avery Park. She worked with us in a sand art collaboration with the Tibetan monks in 2018. So she was thrilled to be part of this presentation. The hotel motel tax funds provided to Dublin Arts Council are used to improve the quality of life for residents, corporate citizens, and visitors. We anticipated receiving $741,000 for programming in 2020, after funds were withheld for public art in the Dublin Arts Center lease. This 2020 budget did not anticipate any increase in hotel motel tax from 2019 to 2020 and represented 80% of Dublin Arts Council's income. The red bars represented in the graph show the City of Dublin revised hotel motel tax revenue estimates based on best, moderate, and worst case scenarios, ranging from a reduction of 38% to a reduction of 65%. Dublin Arts Council's financial response includes 2 primary strategies. One is to reduce expenses, and the second is to increase revenue. To that end, Dublin Arts Council's operating budget was reduced from $1,101,047 to $843,499. These cuts included a 20% reduction in payroll, a 31% cut to programming expenses, and a 20% cut to overhead. We continue to seek ways to reduce costs while exploring forms of low or no cost programming. To increase revenue, Dublin Arts Council immediately sought and has received a $94,800 loan under the Paycheck Protection Program plan. We expect $65,000 to be forgiven and reclassified as revenue. The remainder can be carried forward as a loan at 1% interest if needed. On May 1st, Dublin Arts Council submitted a highly competitive grant application to the National Endowment for the Arts for $500,000 in sustainability funding through the CARES Act. Dublin Arts Council is qualified to apply as a recent NEA grant award recipient. There is a 20 to 25% chance of receiving the funding. The grant is designed to reach underserved populations. Dublin Arts Council's timely comprehensive development plan will be complete in June, providing a short and long-term roadmap to increasing philanthropic efforts and increasing individual giving. We are vigorously undertaking fundraising efforts and campaigns, including Giving Tuesday Now, which I'll address in a later slide. The Columbus Foundation's Big Give campaign is June 10th and 11th. Dublin Arts Council's annual garden party fundraiser has been rescheduled for August 28th at the Conference Center at OCLC. In the event we are still limited in social gathering at that time, we have a new virtual fundraising and digital bidding platform for our ever popular silent auction and on standby, which can be integrated for a virtual gala. With cancellation of the Sundays at Scioto Summer Concert Series, Dublin Arts Council reached out to corporate sponsors to ask for their support to be redirected from Sundays at Scioto to general operating costs. The response has been overwhelming, and I want to acknowledge our supportive corporate community in their effort to keep the arts alive in Dublin. Dublin Arts Council is currently in conversation with the Ohio Arts Council and the Dublin Community Foundation to determine the potential for grants and expanded support. We continue to research and pursue all other potential grant sources. Here's a snapshot of our current budget shortfall projection. The chart is based on calculations from late March and includes estimates for the hotel motel tax that were compiled through communications with the Dublin Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and Experience Columbus. The estimate very closely mirrors the City of Dublin's projections under the moderate model for hotel motel tax funds. The chart also represents the reduced operating budget of $843,499. The net change shows a gap of roughly $360,000 remaining to be filled under this model. Of course, there are many variables which remain. The April books have not yet been closed, but the May 1st cash balance, less liability, is projected to be approximately $460,000. For the nonprofit industry, best practices indicate a reserve fund policy that provides for a minimum of 3 months and a recommended amount of 6 months of operating expense, plus an operating balance for normal monthly expenses. Dublin Arts Council has been working for the last 15 years toward building a 6-month balance. To date, we have achieved a 5-month balance. In comparison, the City of Dublin has a general fund balance of $68.8 million, enough to fuel the city for 10 months. We will use these reserves for number 1, programs currently in planning that respond to COVID-19, 2, to offset the annual cycle of lower hotel motel tax receipts in the first quarter of the year, as is standard, and to address a potential reduction in hotel motel tax funding beyond current projections in both volume and duration. Even with our very limited resources, Dublin Arts Council remains vigilant and dedicated to providing important programming that benefits Dublin residents, corporate citizens, and visitors. The Board of Directors staff are working to increase contributed revenue to help Dublin Arts Council fulfill its mission. Today, May 5th, is Giving Tuesday Now, a global day of giving and unity in emergency response to the needs created by COVID-19. Dublin Arts Council has partnered with Dublin Bridges to bring art supplies and arts education activities to community families who receive free and reduced price school meals. The effort has already raised over $3,000 with a total of 33 donations. Dublin Arts Council will continue to receive these funds through the initial phase through May 26th as part of the nationwide matching fund campaign sponsored by Nonprofit Hub, Fire Spring, and Do More Good, all dedicated to nonprofit education. Dublin Arts is a service organization. We define work, visit, play, and learn in Dublin. To fulfill our mission, and the directive for use of the hotel motel tax funding, which is to improve the quality of life for residents, corporate citizens, and visitors. One of the first things Dublin Arts Council did in mid-March was to create a digital Be Creative resource page, providing creative project ideas and instruction, virtual arts experiences, challenges, mindfulness ideas, and wellness resources to support the greater community. The Your Street Name Here Arts Festival was designed to encourage neighbors to have fun and bring joy to everyone who walks and cycles Dublin neighborhoods. On May 8th and 9th, residents will be placing artwork outside for all to enjoy. As of yesterday, 16 neighborhoods have signed up. A full list will be posted soon, and we'll be stopping by these neighborhoods to celebrate, document, and share. Working in collaboration, Dublin Arts Council can provide value-added support to the Dublin Convention and Visitors Bureau's efforts. We can leverage our existing assets to reach local, statewide, and regional visitors, including our public artwork, with visitors logged from all 50 states via our cell phone tour, and our river boxes, recognized as the top 1% of more than 450 geocachers in the United States. We can reach new audiences with messages targeted to visitors who are explorers, creators, and curious. We can help welcome friends and family back to Dublin to reconnect and celebrate. You can see here that cultural tourism pays dividends with 22% longer stays and 38% higher spending than general tourists. The economic impact of arts programming in Dublin was estimated at 1.25 million last year. In supplementing the DCVB Restart Plan with a no-cost marketing communications effort, Dublin Arts Council can utilize a $10,000 a month grant for paid research through Google Ads. We can also assist in social and traditional media efforts, plus email marketing to reach local and regional patrons who fit the target for the DCVB Start Plan. We're creatively promoting Dublin. Our earned media impressions for the Field of Corn anniversary event alone were over 13 million across the country. Since Dublin Arts Council is a 501c3 nonprofit, we will work in collaboration with the DCVB to research and jointly apply for any available funding to support cultural tourism and reach potential sponsors. On April 23rd, Dublin Arts Council made the difficult decision to cancel the 2020 Sundays at Scioto Summer Concert Series for the first time in its 37-year history. Dublin Arts Council, in collaboration with the city and the CVB, is exploring ways to continue to infuse performing arts into the community with drive-up, in-person, and virtual house concerts, plus other pop-up temporary public art experiences. All 8 of the 2020 Sundays at Scioto musical acts have agreed to perform in 2021. The lineup is linked on our Facebook page and on our website, so the community can enjoy online performances and get to know the artists virtually before they come back to Dublin next year. On the left in this photo is Sundays at Scioto artist George Barry. He is a 2006 Dublin Kaufman High School graduate and is shown here performing a virtual house concert. On the right is Columbus artist Will Freed performing a drive-up neighborhood concert from the back of his pickup truck. Dublin Arts Council also made the difficult but prudent decision to cancel in-person arts camps for the summer of 2020. This of course impacts our earned revenue, but more importantly, it impacts the families who look forward to this experience each summer. With support from the Greater Columbus Arts Council, Dublin Arts Council is convening an ad hoc work group made up of local arts agencies in Hilliard, Grandview, Worthington, and Delaware, in order to make sure art education offerings are an important part of children's activities throughout the summer. Our community is responding to the pandemic creatively with kindness and humor. We are regularly communicating with members of the community and asking them to keep their artifacts for a community created at home exhibition that will take place in the Dublin Arts Council Gallery and other public spaces when we're cleared to gather in person and all safety protocols are in place to open the open the Dublin Arts Center. Dublin Arts Council has created and posted a virtual gallery tour of the exhibition, Rob Both's Earth and Sky, which is currently in the gallery, and is exploring both in-person and virtual options for the next exhibition in our gallery, Sue King, The Great Outdoors. On the left, on this slide, is a group of residents who've taken to writing limericks about bad hair days and isolation and are sending them to us weekly. On the right, you're seeing a collage of kindness tiles found along the path between Wyandotte and Scottish Corners elementary schools. These creations underscore the importance of art and wellness, a theme we began exploring with the community in 2019. The next event, scheduled for September 26th in Scioto Park, titled Connect, will connect visitors with the environment, community, wellness, and one another. In closing, my recommendation is that meeting regularly to form a hotel motel task force that will monitor changes and address needs. The hotel motel task force should include Dublin Arts Council, the CVB, the City of Dublin, and representatives from the hospitality, industry, and business community. The purpose of the task force would be to evaluate the ever-changing travel and tourism environment and to keep each other informed of the rapidly changing economic situation that impacts us all. Together, we can respond in a timely manner to the benefit of Dublin's residents, corporate citizens, and visitors. And now I'd like to thank you for your leadership, direction, and support. In my 16th year as Executive Director of Dublin Arts Council, I am deeply humbled at the outpouring of well wishes and encouragement from my staff, the Board of Directors, and myself. Our community is demonstrating in simple and profound ways that art is not canceled. I hope you'll help us keep our community and visitors creatively engaged and excited about the many arts experiences yet to happen. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, David. We'll
Sure.
ensue this discussion if you want to stop sharing your screen for me.
Sure.
Thank you. We can kind of all see each other while we're talking about this. So Greg and Andy, in the
Yeah, I got a question. The grant that you've applied for with the National Endowment of the Arts, was it 300,000 or 500?
It's 50,000. Sorry, I misspoke.
50,000.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
it's a one once and done. It's 50,000 or nothing. So
Okay. And do you have any idea when you'll know?
June.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very quick turnaround. It's usually a couple months, but
Okay.
it should be, I should know next month.
Okay.
Greg, did you have anything?
The funding for that's set aside in the CIP for the building improvements, how much is that, David?
You asking me?
Or Matt, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I don't.
Greg, there's $475,000 set aside in 2021 in the current CIP for improvements to the Dublin Arts Center.
What are those improvements?
I believe it's a back patio area.
So do you want to go through staff's comments first?
Sure.
Have a more in-depth discussion. Okay. Matt, are you doing this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you want to step through? Oh, you got a presentation?
I do. I just have a couple of quick slides. The first slide, here we go. So we just wanted to lay out the funding options in a little bit more detail. There are a couple potential options should the committee decide to recommend to provide funding to the full council for consideration. These options were outlined in the previous memos provided by the Arts Council and in the memo provided to council for this meeting. But the first option is a forgiveness of the lease payments associated with the Arts Center. The Arts Center lease is about $7,000 per month. As David laid out in his presentation, it totals about $84,000 annually. The second option is there's to remove the requirement that $75,000 per year of the Arts Council funding is currently set aside for the Art in Public Places program. So there are two options that reference this funding. The first is to set aside that $75,000 in this year. The third funding option would be in previous years from 2016 to 2019, that $75,000 was set aside, but was not and has not yet been utilized. So that is essentially sitting in the hotel motel fund balance as part of the fund's $3.9 million balance. About $300,000 of that is allocated to the Art in Public Places program. So that could be reallocated should council decide to go in that direction. The fourth option, as Greg asked about, was to redirect some funds that are currently allocated in the 2020 CIP to the Dublin Arts Center. That allocation totals $475,000 in 2021. Now, typically, when we talk about CIP funds, we're talking about income tax dollars or 401 dollars. But in this case, these capital dollars are coming from the hotel motel fund. So they are the same dollars that we use for operating expenditures, for events, and for the payments to the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Arts Council come out of the same fund as these capital dollars are allocated. So they are available for this purpose. The fifth one is recommended or put in the memo by the Arts Council was to provide a grant for general operating support. And it looked like the memo referenced the 21st had an amount of about $201,000 if you were interested in providing a grant. Now, if the committee is ultimately supportive of this request to provide funding and recommend funding to the full council, staff does have a recommendation for how you might structure this proposal if you're interested in that as well.
I think we would be interested in your recommendation, yes.
Excellent. So staff would recommend that you forgive or suspend the $7,000 per month in leased payments, at least during the term of this emergency. And what that means we could work out as we move through it. We would also recommend that you defer the capital project from 2021 to at least 2022. At that time, we could determine a path forward depending upon the level of support that is ultimately provided to the Arts Council, and take a look at the hotel motel fund balance over 2020 and 2021 to really evaluate all of the priorities of that fund. I think it's important to consider that the hotel motel fund is one of the only special revenue funds that does not require a transfer from the general fund in order to do what it does. And it's unlikely that the hotel motel fund is going to be able to maintain this financial strength without some prioritization of the fund balance and what that fund is going to do during this period of declining revenue. So postponing this decision for another year would seem to be one way that we could tackle this problem now and reevaluate. And then the final recommendation would be similar to the previous proposal. We would want to structure this in such a way that we could maximize reimbursement under the CARES Act. So this would be, again, a new appropriation with a new professional services agreement that is separate from kind of the way we currently do business with the Arts Council. Since the funding mechanism would be different, we could structure it a little differently so that we could seek reimbursement. And then obviously, if we're successful in seeking reimbursement, we could reevaluate that capital project and the fund balance in light of that successful reimbursement. So those are our recommendations should you decide to fund this request.
Thank you, Matt. Greg or Andy, thoughts, questions?
What is the total amount of the request? Is it 201? Is that the number we have to get to?
David, do you want to handle that? Or I thought I saw it was 360, if I'm not mistaken, is the total request.
360 is the gap, yes.
So Matt, is there a reason that you would not recommend removing the requirement that DC encumber the arts and public places?
I think our thought there is that the art in public places is a community-wide benefit, and for least impact, narrowing the focus to the capital improvements would seem to do that. But again, that's a policy decision, but that was our thinking.
Well, and this gets us there if we really defer the capital improvements for at least a year, right? This gets us beyond filling that gap, potentially.
That's correct.
Can you guys hear me okay? I think
Mhm.
so. So I just want to make clear. So I'm reading the Arts Council's request of City of Dublin, removal or deferment of lease payments, provide hotel motel tax funds. Looks like a total of 300,000 there. And then bullet point number 4, grant a separate hotel motel tax request of 240. So if I add those two numbers, I get 540. So, and I am a little confused as to what is the amount that's being requested.
360, I think.
Is it 360? That's the
Yep.
gap. Is
That's-
that what you're requesting?
think- Yeah, I think that's what they're asking us to try to ungap.
Okay, so if we're just funding that gap, it would seem to me like you said, Christina, simply deferring that capital improvement and using those funds would seem to me to make the most sense.
Yeah, I'm okay with the deferring the lease payments month by month as well. I mean, just from a cash flow perspective, that could be helpful to them. You know, and that is sort of some standard practice that's been going on with a lot of folks is, you know, they're getting 30, 60, or 90 days of, you know, either lease forgiveness or lease deferral. So I would be fine with that as well. To Scott Draing's point earlier, it does kind of stink that their landlord did not do that for them. You know, so I would be fine with that part. Greg, thoughts?
Yeah,
See-
I'm fine with both of those things. I think the two bullet points. Well, I don't know which memo I'm looking at, but I think removing the rent requirement until we're past this is a good idea, and deferring the capital improvement gives us the most flexibility to get back on track as soon as we possibly can next year. I support both of those things.
So what are your thoughts, Andy and Greg, about deferring the lease payments or forgiving the lease payments? There's a difference.
Matt, Dana?
Quick question on that. How much time is left on their current lease?
I believe their current lease runs through 2026.
That sounds right.
But we pay off, the city will own that building this year.
That's correct.
And what do we have to pay? What's our encumbrance a month that we have to pay on those bonds?
We pay 165,000 this year, so 12 to 13 grand a month.
That's not a balloon payment either. I think that's consistent with all the other previous payments.
Wow.
Yeah, I think my and Matt's thought along this line was, you know, there's a gap to be filled from a policy perspective. If we want to keep the lights on with the Arts Council and for them to continue to provide the great services they are, it sounds like you want to go that route. That would be a recommendation to council. Easy target, sorry, Dave, but the easy target is the 500 is that capital project that's out there, at least to defer. And the challenge here is obviously all this has to happen within the bed tax fund, right? Where we can't really go elsewhere to make this happen. You don't have money coming in. We're not raising money. We're not, you know, there's other demands on it. We have a reserve, which will dwindle. It's not going to refill itself. So the idea of deferring the capital budget certainly helps with the cash flow thing. I don't, and Matt and I talked about this a little bit before too, that the difference between forgiving or deferring the lease payment, it's kind of
$21,000 or, you know,
Right.
42,000.
from a cash flow perspective. I don't know if you have an issue with how that works, but
It has more of an effect on DAC's cash flow than it's gonna on the cities.
Sure.
We have scheduled later in this discussion, another discussion on lease collections and cash flow and suspension versus forgiveness. So this is a preview of a discussion we'll have on some other organizations later, just to let you know that we're going to be tackling this as the fifth topic tonight as well. Regarding some of our.
I guess my point is, if you forgive the lease, that's less you're taking away from the capital project. So either way, we're not going to go beyond. I think both of those, it's not forgiving the lease and giving the 360. It's the 360, however you want to spread that over the months. And if you forgive the lease, or Dave gave us a great memo. I want to thank him for his proposal, and he identified where in the initial letter he wrote to us where these things can come from. And I really appreciate the Arts Council saying, hey, you can take it from all these different areas to fill the gap. Their mission, they want to keep providing service. And that's most impactful to the residents right now and in the near term. The capital projects are great. Even the art and public places projects are great, but they're willing to let those things go for the sake of the fund in order that they can provide their first priority, which is programmatic services to the public. So we can always figure out the capital stuff later, see how the fund bounces back. I know we're going to have to take a lot of look at this fund relative to Irish Festival and other things as well as we go forward here the next month or so. So I think at the end of the day, you would forgive the lease, and then whatever that means, you're going to make up the difference out of the deferment of the capital project. Matt, am I speaking out of turn? If I am, I know you'll set me straight there. So
I think you got it.
David, is there any pain that I caused with that? I mean, it's still the goal is the 360, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the reason there's so many options and so many numbers that you see in front of you is just because I was trying to give Dana as many options as possible, as he said. So that's why there's no real specific ask, but the 360 is the gap that we're trying to fill. So if anything would be the ask, that would be it.
Okay.
So sorry for all the numbers.
Okay.
So my thought with respect to the lease payments is forgiving the lease payments, perhaps until the end of the year through December. To me, there has to be an end date.
Yeah, I'm going to get the lease payments for a period of time. Maybe it is 6 months or through the end of the year. I think that's fine. And then we make up the rest of that difference in the capital plan. That makes the most sense. Greg, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I would have the same. I like the forgiving the rent and just bringing finality to that issue and just deciding how long it is we would want to do it instead of deferring it. And then the capital program seems to me to be the most obvious place to find those funds. I would have the same comments about David, and you look at Robin Campbell and David Guion. You don't get higher shelf people than that. You got Scott Dring and Dr. Lee running that show, and you got these two running this one. When you are in a time of great stress, you don't want to lose your identity or lose sight of who you really are. And this organization in so many ways represents all that's unique and good and pure and worth defending in this community. And what we need to do to adjust to make sure that they can keep doing that through this situation and get us to the other side. I'm fully supportive of it. You've got the credibility of David Guion and Robin Campbell on the line, and I am perfectly willing to invest in them.
So I think that the proposal on the table right now, Greg and Andy, just so I can recap so we're all on the same page, is we go ahead and forgive the lease payments through the end of December, and we take the balance of that 360 gap from the CIP amount. All right, I need a motion to that effect. Wait,
Moved.
ask if there's any public input.
There's been no public input.
Thank you, Anne. So now I will need a motion to what I just said.
I will make a motion to forgive lease payments through the end of this year and to take the rest of the money out of the capital improvement plan.
I need a second.
Second.
Anne?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
and Ms. Aludo.
Yes. And David and Robin, I just want to echo what Greg was saying. We have so much faith in the work that you do. For a community our size, we have an incredibly active arts council. And frankly, every other community that I talk to is incredibly envious of the work that you do. So
Thank you.
we are happy to support you, and keep doing the work that you're doing. The
Thank you
community.
very much.
Thank you. It's a real honor. Thank you.
Chairman Aludo, your expenses 20% goes a long way. And Janet was a great hire too. Is it Janet?
Yes,
don't-
it's Janet. She's
Yeah, she's doing an excellent job. You need to forge ahead in times like these, and she's doing a really good job at that.
thank you. I will pass that along to her. She's an amazing addition to the staff. Yeah.
Great.
Dana?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Ludo. Dave and Robin, just so you're aware, and I meant to, and you may, and I apologize, Chairman, if you already said this, but this is recommendation of committee that goes back to council as a whole, right? So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And typically they'll support the committee's vetting of this. So, but I just can't promise on their behalf, but just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Thanks, Dana. All right, so moving on in our agenda, the next topic of discussion is the status of bed tax grants. So Matt, Dana?
Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you, Chairman. There are just a few topics that we need to talk about that COVID-19 is impacting, and we want to get your feedback and guidance on before we get too far along in this process. And they involve bed tax grants, beautify your neighborhood grants, and then lease collections. Just want to provide some information and get some feedback on these. So this table displays the bed tax grants that were awarded in 2020. You can see the award amount in the second column there. The important thing to note is that at this time, no organization has requested any reimbursement for 2020 funds. They may or may not have incurred expenses. I'm not aware of any yet, but they have not requested any reimbursements. As you can see, many of the events scheduled in April through June have already been canceled or postponed. And as this emergency progresses, we could probably expect that to continue. So relative to these grants, staff are proposing that we take the following actions. And we're proposing that for events canceled in 2020 due to COVID-19, that the events be allowed to receive reimbursement for their eligible expenditures specified in the grant application. So if they had reimbursements for city services, I think we have a permit fee, they would be eligible for reimbursement for that type of activity. Typically, if you don't have an event, we don't offer reimbursement, but because of the circumstances, we're trying to find a middle ground, to propose a middle ground. Additionally, we're proposing that funds appropriated for events to be held in 2020 not be permitted to roll over in future years. And the rationale for that is many of these events are annual. They will apply in November, and we'll have an opportunity to provide them with funding for 2021 at that time. And what we don't want to do is have a situation where the bed tax is already under stress and we're doubling the amount of community grants that we're applying. If in November we decide we want to go back and fund some of these events, we have the opportunity in November to make 2021 bed tax grant appropriations and set the appropriation appropriately at that time. So we're seeking some guidance on these two kind of policy implementation actions, and this is what we're proposing tonight.
Thanks, Matt. Andy or Greg, you want to kick off the conversation?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Super. Yeah, I think for events canceled this year where they did incur some amount of expense in preparation for that and you want to reimburse them, I think that's fine. And I think the second bullet is fine as well. I think ultimately at some point we want to talk about the policy around bed tax grants and how we tie those to fund balance and what we're working on. I think we can pause for a minute on that given the circumstances. But I do think that before the next round of applications, we should probably have that discussion. I know that was sort of on our docket of things to talk about this year for the Finance Committee. So I don't want to lose sight of that either.
Yeah, if I could, I would like to add that, a couple of these, council specifically referred the first two items on your agenda to you. These other items I had asked, I know that I looked at it as council wanted to address certain policy issues. I don't know if you remember that discussion at the last council meeting. A couple of these other ones on here were just to try to get some feedback and thoughts on this, just a little bit of vetting to kind of help us think about how to approach all of council as a whole. So if these feel like they're a little bit beyond that's the reason for that. So I hope I'm not on thin ice for that, but I felt I need to get a little feedback. So
No, I think it's completely appropriate to get some temperatures here at the committee level. Andy? Hey, Matt, will you stop sharing your screen just so we can see each other? Hey.
My only question is about the reimbursement. Is that, so let's say somebody had an event planned, they canceled it, but they incurred expenses that are not related to the city of Dublin. Are they eligible to submit a reimbursement request for that?
If in their grant application, they were awarded itemized items pursuant to that application, then yes.
Okay.
Other thoughts on these two items? They sound pretty reasonable, I think, for both of them, but I don't want to miss
Yeah,
anybody's.
that makes sense to me because you asked for the money for these expenses. You actually incurred the expenses and you're going to be using the money for that expense. They're spending it on exactly what they asked to spend it on and we approve. So I think that's an appropriate thing to do. Now with the event being canceled, they can't incur additional expense or somehow try to get reimbursed for expenses they didn't incur. But I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
Excellent. Other comments? All right. Did we receive any public comments by email?
We did not.
Okay, so I think we need a motion to send this out of committee so that Dana's got direction for all of council.
Right.
Perfect.
So you need a motion that we approve bed tax funds to be reimbursed or expenses to be reimbursed as they would have been laid out in the request.
Yes, and for the funds that are appropriated in 2020 for these events that are canceled, that they not be rolled over into subsequent years.
I would make that the second part of my motion.
Excellent. I need a second. You're muted.
Second?
Thank you. And
Ms. Aludo,
yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
and Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
All right, Dana and Matt, you guys have what you need on that?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Excellent. The next item is postponement of the Beautify Your Neighborhood grants. Matt, is that you again?
That's me again.
Excellent.
So the Beautify Your Neighborhood grants are appropriated $32,000 out of the general fund on an annual basis. And we are proposing that we postpone any decision on these grants until August. This is consistent with previous years when there have been multiple rounds of funding for these grants. They're usually awarded once in the spring and then once in the fall. And given the financial situation, we thought it was prudent to postpone these until August, reevaluate where we're at, and then make a decision at that time on moving forward with these grants or not. So we're looking for your direction on postponing these grants until August.
It makes good sense to me, but Andy, Greg?
He put his mood on.
Oh, Andy, unmute yourself, man.
I am okay with the proposal as written or as requested.
Greg, thoughts?
Yep. No, that makes sense.
All right. Do we have any public comment via email?
We do not.
Great. So I will need a motion that we postpone the Beautify Your Neighborhood grants until August.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
and Ms. Aludo.
Yes. Thank you. And the last item on our agenda is the suspension/forgiveness of lease collections.
Yes, so similar to the Arts Council discussed earlier, there are some city facilities that are leased to the following organizations: Subway, the Dublin Village Tavern, and the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, in the amounts listed there per month. It's important to note that the governor issued an executive order regarding the suspension of leases for small commercial businesses. And in that executive order, he requested that small commercial lease operations be allowed to suspend their leased payments for 90 days. So that was only a request and only a suspension. We are, asking for some policy discussion and some understanding of the city's position on forgiving this obligation, as we just did with the Dublin Arts Council, or suspending these small commercial lease payments for the duration of the emergency, and what council's guidance might be on that. We are not seeking to make any changes to contractual agreements on our fiber rental, as those are not small commercial leases, nor are we making any changes to the 5,800 building rental at this time. So those are basically those are the three leases in addition to the Arts Council that would really be impacted by this policy decision, and we're just seeking some guidance.
Matt, do we have any debt on any of those?
No, I don't believe we do.
I didn't think so.
The only thing I would add is, you might recall, we're scheduled to do an improvement as part of that new lease with the chamber. So we'll be doing, some capital improvement on that building. Right now, I plan to continue to go forward with that. At least we're going to do the more finite architectural work and get bids on it and see how we come out.
I mean, I'm assuming, Dana, that subway is the one in the rec center.
It is, and I was going to raise that. Thank you. I was going to mention that, we shut down city facilities, so it's kind of like they didn't have a choice. So of all of them, that's the easiest one and most obvious one, I would hope. But we want to.
That one feels like a no-brainer to me personally.
It is. You know what? It is. At the end of the day, we're not paying anything on this stuff. I think it's the right thing to just. Maybe we do it. How often does this committee meet? How often does finance meet?
Depends on the agenda. We had several. Did we have them about every other month, right, Matt?
Yeah, we have budget time coming up, so we're going to be seeing a lot of each other.
You know what? So for me, I would be comfortable forgiving the lease payments for like 90 days and revisiting it in 90 days. I think, Dublin Village Tavern, at least they're still trying to, we got carry out down there last night, but it's nothing like they had. They are a real visible part of this community. And the chamber, of course, that's obviously very visible as well. And, if we were writing a check, to pay off debt, I guess I would feel differently. I just think that maybe just forgiving this for now and kicking the can down the road is just going to require Matt to have another line item on some spreadsheet somewhere to try to keep track of, and the administration and the headache of all of that. I think it's the right signal, this right message to send, to forgive the lease payments for 90 days and don't tell them that that's the end. We'll revisit it in 90 days and see where we are. That's just for
Look at that, Greg, looking out for your workload there. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think a 90-day forgiveness, and then we can look at potential either suspension or deferral after that 90 days. We can always come back and revisit this. I agree with you. That's why I asked the debt question. If we had debt on these, I think I have some trepidation. Look, it's a no-brainer on the subway. We just need to forgive that lease payment, as long as the rec center has to stay closed.
I'm only
So
curious
90
if,
days for one and relook. Andy?
I was just going to say, I'm just curious if you received any phone calls from Subway or Dublin Village Tavern requesting.
I've received a letter from Subway basically indicating you closed the building, quit charging me rent.
Yeah.
I
Makes
can't say.
sense.
Right.
Nothing from the tavern?
I have not had any communication with them, no.
This would feel like an early Christmas present.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're everybody's hurting right now. And I would say they may be more than others. So I'm all for it.
All right, that was an easier conversation than I anticipated. So I will need a motion to forgive 90 days of rent payment from DVT, from Subway, and from the chamber.
So moved.
A second.
Just real quick, if I could, Matt, what would be the effective date? Would that be March, April, May, or is that April, May, June? When would that actually start? I meant to ask you that before the meeting.
That's a good question. I think we held off on billing current month, waiting for this discussion. It would probably be May. We're in May, June, and July, I think would be the 90.
So you
So we
received
maybe
in April?
backdate it 1 month and go the April and the next 90 days so that we don't have a gap in there. If that's,
As
you know,
the 90 days being April, May, and June.
Okay,
Is that right?
that makes sense to me, especially for Subway.
it could be, I believe we already billed April is what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm sorry for the confusion and to jump in. So Subway should really be retro from the time we closed.
Yeah.
You know, wouldn't logic, if, to make this easier, make Subway different and say we will not charge them rent for the period of time the rec center's closed.
I agree.
Backdated to when it was closed, and it's going to be forgiven until it's open.
Yep.
With respect to the chamber and DVT for the next 90 days, however you want to clock it, Matt, so they don't have to send us any more cash for a 90-day period of time, and we'll revisit those two entities maybe later.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Does that
good.
make
So
sense? Yeah.
that makes perfect sense to me. Andy?
That's great. I only from maybe a disclosure standpoint, I would say that, you know, the way lease agreements are written, the tenant is obligated to pay a certain amount over a period of time. So we are being very generous in forgiving part of that as opposed to tacking it on at the end. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, glad you said that. I think that's a really good point. I'm glad we had this discussion because I forgot to ask Anne if there was any public input before we made our motions.
There is not.
Okay. Dana, did you have something else?
I'm sorry to think about these. That's why we have these meetings, because these things come up. So, you know, I know that we were going to have legal staff go back and revisit, you know, how does that tie back into agreements and things like that. So we may tag on to this, you know, and authorizing the city manager to adjust lease agreements as may be necessary.
Sure.
You know, and that way I don't have to bring the agreement back for approval in addition to now we're 60 days down the road before we give anybody relief. So that would defeat the purpose here. So.
Yes, thank you for that. That makes perfect sense. So I think, Greg, we need to amend your original motion such
Okay,
that,
let me try this again.
Okay.
Yes. So I would make a three-pronged motion. One, that we forgive Subway's lease payment for the entirety of the closure of the rec center. Two, that we forgive DVT and the chamber for 90 days, depending on whenever Matt wants to start that. And three, that we authorize Dana to amend any contracts to reflect this understanding.
right. And I need a second.
Second.
Anne?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
and Ms. Aludo.
Yes. All right, well, that brings us actually to the end of our agenda. We've done an excellent job this evening. Matt, and Dana, do you have everything that you need to move forward?
I do. Thank you, committee members, for your time tonight and for working through those issues. There's a lot of small things that need to be taken care of, small decisions that need policy guidance, and I appreciate your time wading through them. I fear this is just the start of the type of questions that I will bring to you this year, but I appreciate your guidance tonight.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Is there anything else for the good of the order tonight, guys? Nope. Then we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for all your work. Have
All
a
right.
great